Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our Governor, Chris Sununu.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Deb said I have a limited amount of time. Please sit down. She so said that because she knows, especially on this topic, I will go on all day a little bit. So I will do my best to kind of make it brief, and I thank you, Sean, and I appreciate the introduction. I could probably turn this into 2 hours, to be honest. There's my speech right there. I actually wrote something. That's how much I care about this. I never write things, but this one I wrote a few things down. So a few, what's with the podium? All right, this is a trick. There we go. We're going to do this. Okay. It is great to see everybody here. It really is. And once again, one thing I always try to highlight is the fact that, look, we have a packed room here. It is a full house. And it's some different faces, right? You have some elected officials, right? You have folks in law enforcement. You have folks on the prevention side. You have folks in the recovery world. What I really like about it, you have a lot of young people here and a lot of students. And that is the stakeholders. That is what this is really about. It's one thing for us to kind of talk in a room, and we talk to ourselves, and we all kind of agree, and we all feel good about it. We have a nice breakfast, and we go along our way. It's another thing to really engage those stakeholders. Again, not just to talk at them, but to make sure that we're listening to what is happening in their world. I am not the youngest anymore, by the way. I'm one of the youngest. I think DeSantis is now younger than me from Florida. But being one of the younger governors in the country, I still try to appreciate what I don't know with the next generation and the generation following that. There's a whole different set of variables that they use in terms of decision making, in terms of peer pressure, in terms of toxic stresses, and all the different things that kind of get in the way of good prevention, frankly. Our job is to set up as many doors as possible. That's government's job. One of those doors that has been set up but a little creaky to open sometimes for a few years is on prevention, right? We put a lot of effort on treatment and recovery, enforcement. We're doing more than ever, and it's great. The hub and spoke system, it's all about making sure individuals have a better pathway, making sure individuals have pathways in their communities, rural access to care. I mean, I'm not going to go through the whole story, but one of the drivers for me for the hub and spoke system, not just Katya Fox, who was here, and Katya and her team were so instrumental. I mean, the real architects of designing this. But for me, it was about here in Grafton at a parade on 4th of July a few years ago, and running into a young woman, I won't go through the whole story, but at the end of that story, the light went off in my head, and I realized it was really making sure we had those rural connections to care. It's one of those reasons why Bob Guida, Senator Guida, has been so instrumental in holding the line on this. I think everyone assumed this bill was going to hit my desk on marijuana. And the fact that he was able to really work hard with a lot of other senators and just talk about facts, not use politics. This is not a political issue. It does require some political leadership sometimes to step forward and making sure you're talking about the right things and you're doing the right things. But this isn't a political issue, and he was just absolutely instrumental, so I can't thank you enough for recognizing Bob this morning. You know, we've done a lot, and again, you know, the hub and spoke is just taking off. That's one of the big things we're focusing on now, not designing the system and getting the money, because we've got all that. In fact, we designed our system so fast, we started putting our money out in the right way to the point where the federal government the administration came and said, we're going to give you another $10 million on top of the 43 or whatever that they had already given us. So we have an unprecedented amount of money coming into this state to deal with addiction right now. The thing that I also want to focus on is the fact that we keep using the word addiction. It is not just about opioids. And it is not just, and by the way, if you see what some of the numbers I've seen lately, you have meth going crazy right now, especially in Grafton, Concord, parts of Merrimack. There's all these other things. You kind of squeeze one end of the tube of toothpaste and something else comes out the other end. You have to design a system for the long term, not just for the next 2 years. I don't know, you don't know what we're going to be talking about in 10 years. Is it going to be opioids and fentanyl? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's something new that we haven't even discovered and figured out yet. The whole point is you have to have an infrastructure of a system there. You have to be able to be supportive of that and get the people involved and have the workforce to drive forward on it to make sure that, again, if you want to be preventative, you have to have that system designed today for 10 and 20 years down the road. For decades, New Hampshire just wasn't there. We have been a state of addiction, as most people know in this room, or maybe you don't. We've been a state of addiction for 40, 50 years. Alcoholism. One of the highest rates of alcoholism in the country has always been here. And we're very community driven. We're kind of old school Yankees. We kind of keep to ourselves on those issues. No more. That's what this is all about, getting the community engaged. There is no single individual of the 1.35 million people that live in this state, there is no single individual that doesn't have a responsibility to understand this issue and say, what can I do at home? And that's one of the biggest calls to action. I mean, there's a couple calls to action here, but it's what are you going to do when you walk out of here? A lot of you work in organizations. It is your life. You do it. God bless you. It's awesome, right? But we all know 10 people who know what opioids are, might know someone who's addicted. That's terrible. We know it's a crisis in New Hampshire. We seem to be getting on the right track. That's all kind of good news, but nothing to pat our back on. But are they really getting engaged? Do your selectmen really know what services are available in the community? Do your neighbors really know what they would do if they found out if, God forbid, one of their kids became addicted? Right? That's the next barrier. We've gotten the message out there, but now it's does the average person understand what they would do, who they would call, where the resources are, because there are resources there. We also, someone else who hasn't been recognized today, and I want to just say a big thank you, is Patrick Tufts. Patrick Tufts is the chairman of the Governor's Commission on Alcohol and Misuse. He's the guy that's really helped organizing and bringing all the feedback in to decide how we're going to spend a lot of this money to make sure that it's getting everywhere. And he was one of the individuals that came and said, look, prevention, we got to do more. Him and Tim Lena have done, where's Tim? Is Tim here? There he is. Have done incredible work on the prevention side of things. We have this disparate prevention program in our schools, right? So the idea of kind of coalescing a lot of that and putting not a few $100,000 after it, but millions of dollars after it, and that's where we're going next, because that's the only way you win this thing in the long term. The other thing I want to really jump on a little bit is the concept of we don't just talk about addiction. When you talk about prevention and addiction and drug and misuse, again, we tend to have all folks in this silo. There are no more silos in New Hampshire. That is a huge thing, and we have to be vigilant about that. When you talk about mental health, when you talk about homelessness, when you talk about abused kids, it is all connected. It doesn't mean that everyone, that has a mental health issue is abusing drugs, but they all overlap, and we have to have a good understanding of that. There's a reason why law enforcement is so engaged in the prevention issue. There's a reason why folks in the recovery world are finally getting involved in the treatment world, and the folks in the treatment world are getting involved in understanding what enforcement is all about and how that piece works. Everybody is taking responsibility to at least understanding what the other hand is doing. The left hand and the right hand really have to work in concert, something we really champion in Concord a lot, but we need your help doing it. It's very easy if government left to its own devices, we'll fall kind of back into those silos. Not because they're bad people or whatever. It's human nature. We tend to focus on our world, get our stuff done. But you gotta break through that barrier a little bit and really make sure you're saying, well, I'm getting my stuff done, but that thing over there might be impacting our world as well. I better understand how that works. And so we gotta constantly challenge ourselves, not just this year, next year, but 5, 10 years. We have to create a habit of it, so to say. The last thing I want to do is I'm not going to get political. This is not a political issue. But when it comes to fighting this thing, and it is coming back in January, and that bill very well could end up on my desk, and vetoes could very well get overturned. It isn't just we hope to. I'm going to contradict. I love Deb, but I'm going to contradict her a little bit. We don't want you to join us. We want you to lead the charge. I really, really mean that. Get engaged with your elected officials. I don't care what party they are from. Get engaged. Write a letter, make a call. But it isn't just, I hope you will support us. It is, I expect to see you testifying on this bill. I'd love to see the federal delegation get involved. Right? I'd love to see that legalization of marijuana wasn't in a party platform. It's one of the dumbest things you could ever possibly do. Right? Think of the messaging that we're sending to people. Right? And the fact that, look, it's not a political issue, but we're a political state. Let's understand that. We have a responsibility with the First in the Nation primary. We're going to have 20, 30, 50, I don't know how many people coming in running for president, right? It's great. I'll bring them all in. I think it's wonderful. It's a huge opportunity that we have and a huge responsibility that we have. And will this issue come up as part of that? You bet it will. You bet it will, because they're trying to figure out what to do at the federal level. And even I don't think I'm letting out any secrets. I've had a lot of tough discussions within the administration. They're trying to figure out what to do. I've talked to the Attorney General Barr about it. I've talked to the President of the United States about it. I've talked to his staff about it. There's a lot of disagreement in that group, and they're trying to figure out where to go and what to do. I'd love to see the federal government get involved. More importantly, I'd love to see our federal delegation take leadership here. I know where they're against it. They know. But get out there, fight for it, and demand that they fight for it. And whether it's your state senator or your representatives, call them. Let them know it is important to you. right? The arguments are all there, and God bless Luke and Kevin for what they've done with Sam bringing in this messaging, partnering with Katie, making something really powerful happen here. The fact the bill didn't even get to my desk is wonderful, but it's coming back. And so our testimony and our messaging has to be even stronger next time, because they're building up. And Bob was absolutely right. This is not about legalization. This is about commercialization. This is Big Tobacco 2.0. That's what this is. And once that door is opened, it'll never be closed. So we have to stand firm day after day. Now the good news is this. People say, well, all the other states around you are doing it, Governor. Why don't you just do it? And I get 100 emails a day, because people know I've been out in front on this issue. And I get 100 emails a day that say, Governor, just do it for the revenue. First, I don't need the revenue. I got a $200 million surplus. New Hampshire does not need your tax dollars. Keep your money. Not to mention legalizing drugs for money has so many ethical issues tied into it amongst itself. But second is really making sure people understand you can't sit there and say, we are going to lead this country. We're going to become a gold standard with our hub and spoke system. We're going to be that model that other states represent in terms of fighting back addiction. And by the way, we're going to legalize more drugs at the same time. It's silliness. It makes no sense. But it's going to keep coming. Now, Maine, Vermont, and Massachusetts, the good news there is they're completely screwed up on this issue. They really are. They can't figure out how to enforce it. They're having problems justifying the regulatory aspects of it, to the point where they're kind of just throwing their hands up and saying, well, we're not even going to really enforce our laws completely because we don't even understand how to do that. The good news is other states are falling down on themselves on this issue. And that's the benefit we've always had. We've waited. We've been patient. We've always said now is not the time, and now it's being more and more clear that says maybe never is the time. Because look at how bad it's what's happening in those other states. Use that data. Use that testimony. Look, stay on top of this stuff. Hold everybody accountable. We have 1.35 million people. This is not about a legislative win this year. Prevention in the hub and spoke issue isn't just about opioids for the next 2 or 3 years. We have the money. We have the resources. This is truly about being responsible to that next generation. And if you can't tell, the governor's hat got thrown out before I stepped on the stage. I'm wearing my dad hat. I got a 13 and a 14-year-old. I got a 6-year-old. I am scared to death. I really am. And I get fired up about it because just as a parent, I'm looking at the young people in this room. That's my world right now. And I've seen so many people walk into my office, so many people across this state who had incredible futures ahead of them, and they were absolutely destroyed. And I have yet to find one person that hasn't been addicted to opioids or addicted to heroin that didn't tell me that marijuana wasn't part of that pathway. Of course it was. Of course it was. Stay vigilant, stay on top of it, and we will win this thing long term. Thank you, guys, and thank you, Deb.